Welcome everybody, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, members of the panel. I'd like to welcome you to my presentation, an exploration and critical analysis of methods for effectively communicating a three-dimensional architectural visualization. Now I'd like to start you off with the property development industry. Now, an architect gets a mental picture and then puts that down into a sketch. That goes into a plan which meets specific guidelines, and that then needs to be communicated to a town planner so it can be approved in the development application. Now, so that the town planner's mental picture and the architect's mental picture match up, a method of communication is used, basically an artist's impression. Commonly that's a scale model, or sometimes referred to as miniature model, or computer-generated perspective. And commonly inside the industry, these two mental images don't quite match up. And because of that, it costs the building industry millions of dollars per year on making changes and basically different communication issues that end up costing more time than money. So that brings me to my research question. What is the most effective method for communicating a three-dimensional architectural visualization? I'll start off with the key terms, then I'll explain my research approach, and I'll go through the research in a series of dialects, which is chronological order that I've chosen as my methodology. Then I'll go and give you a package presentation and end up with conclusions on the process and my research data. Then finally, recommendations for further research, and I'll invite questions from the panel. Just to keep everybody on track, I want to explain the key terms. Three main key terms is architectural visualization, method of communication, and effective communication. If you want to refer to your handouts, I've actually got this there for you to explain, which also explains mental image. Now, architectural visualization is actually on page 3. Architectural visualization is the whole structure of understanding. The method of communication, as explained before, is an artist's impression, be it a miniature model or scale, a miniature model or computer-generated perspective. And effective communication is when the mental picture of the architect and the town planner, when those two mental pictures meet, it becomes effective communication. To explain how I actually wanted to approach this research. Overall, it's an action research approach. Action research wants to give improvement to a social situation, and I wanted to improve architectural visualizations. I also needed some way of actually navigating my way through action research, and I chose a common practitioner's way of using action research, which is soft systems methodology. And I've given a diagram here of one way of displaying soft systems methodology. As the name explains, soft system can be displayed in many different ways. I've chosen a series of dialects, and that's how I'll be explaining my research and findings. So to start off with, I'll move into dialect 1. This is where I immerse myself in reality and try to find the essence of the situation. My initial perception of the problem was that computer-generated architectural visualizations that were perceived as real was the most effective method for communication. I accompanied this with a literature investigation and found that there was ambiguity in the word I was using with realism, especially with computer graphics, and I was only segmenting on realism in computer graphics. I found out that there was a pursuit of physics, of biology, and even cultural conditionings of the word real. I realised that realism was not the essence of actually what I was looking for. I needed to go broader. I self-reflected and found communication was actually the essence of the problem. So now that I've defined the essence, I need to invent an ideal. Inventing an ideal, I went through numerous attempts to disconfirm my emerging interpretations. I used literature investigation, participant observation, and a dialect with my supervisor. And to give you an idea of actually where the ideal solution came up with was virtual reality. And the reason why virtual reality was the most effective that I had perceived at the time, the ideal or the conceptual model that I had made at that stage, was that the ability to walk around the environment meant that you could spatialise an object. To give you an example of this, Warwick Lawrence, my supervisor in personal communications, actually gave a really good account of this. He made a model for a house extension. He made an animated fly-through of this. Time after time of showing this to his wife, she just couldn't quite get the space. Later, in developing an interactive version, he used that same model. When he showed this to her, he was quite surprised. She immediately got it. Oh, now I've got it. I never could make sense of that fly-through. She understood the space of the environment, completed spatialisation, and the communication method became effective. Now, the aim of communication was the understanding of the space of the house. Now, the aim of visualisations and development application is also the same. To understand the space of the environment that needs to be built so the town planner is able to understand it and complete effective communication. Now, this isn't a new area of study. Kimball Wells, back in 1994, went through the whole design process. I noticed there was actually low emphasis on evaluation. So I wanted to look at this differently. I wanted to go on something that I could say was unique. I looked at specifically the development application process, communicating architecture visualisations in that specific settings for councils in New South Wales. Now, I went through an extensive process of design. I looked for literature investigation on virtual reality, looked at different methods of communication in the essence of virtual reality. I was looking at the broader topic. I was going back to the literature and trying to find sources that would back up my specific area. I found an argument between navigation versus immersion. And as you see, the archetypal thing when you think of virtual reality is the head-mounted display, the guy walking around. And then you've got entertainment, and the essence of that is navigation. What I'm drawing upon here is that the immersion using the academic virtual reality was great for specific settings in different biological things, but what actually made space perception that much effective, and it's proven because of video games. We have video games in our everyday life, and that's a proven method. People understand the environment. You can tell a person to walk through, if they are an avid game player, to walk through their Quake environment, and they'll be able to walk you through it. They understand the space in their head, and in all dimensions, they know to what point it needs to be. That is the mental picture I'm trying to communicate. Now, there was another reason why I chose entertainment versus immersion in reality. the head-mounted display actually retrains the depth perception of your eye. What happens is you put a head-mounted display on for more than 20 minutes, and you'll be walking to a wall. It may take a minute, it may take a day if you actually get the perception to come back. It's like ethically wrong. It is not effective communication because I'm ruining my target market's depth perception. So I've got quite a few things that are backing it up. Once more, it was actually cost effective to use video games or navigation, the entertainment argument, because video games are actually sold with a level editor inside them. This brings me to what I used. I used the popular video game Unreal Tournament. Comes with it a level editor and video tutorials on how to use it. So I went through all the different video tutorials and taught myself how to be a level designer. So I was implementing, I was moving into my next dialect. Problems I found with that? Well, level design is an actual architectural visualization. It's an architect, the way he makes it, he puts it onto a plan. I need to look back at my model of what was actually happening. So once it's in the plan, the quickest way to get it and visualize it should be reusing that plan. This is me making a level in Unreal Engine, purely inside Unreal Engine, which is the editor for Unreal Tournament, which is the video game I chose to use. And this is what happens when I try to bring in the plan. I came through a lot of different problems because the solution wasn't made for architects as such. I needed to follow a set guideline and augment my own way of actually implementing it. Because of that, I ended up making a video tutorial on how to do it for architects themselves and specified it, gave back to the community. I'd been through a learning process and I tried to give back. What did I end up with? This is the virtual environment. I actually tried to make it more like a scale model. I knew that scale models from my participant observation was actually one of the effective ways. I'm definitely not saying that scale models and photo montages are not effective. I was looking for one that was more effective. In my participant observation and my literature investigation, I found certain areas that just fell short. There was always that small element that didn't quite communicate. So I wanted to find a way that would communicate. And I was borrowing from items that I had seen were effective. I thought using a virtual environment with scale models would be effective. When I actually tested this on my first interview with the supervisor, my second supervisor, who was an architect, and he actually designed this development, I noticed one of the flaws with this design was that I was caught up in my own subjectivity. Salma calls it self-perception. And Salma 1999, and that should be in that is inside your handouts. Page 4, the bottom. No, sorry, it's on my next slide. Now this is what the architect was able to see. This is what I want to explain to you about my own subjectivity. The background here isn't as you would see it in reality. I was trying to emulate virtual reality, and I was using something that was not trying to be communicated. I'd over-intellectualized the communication of the architectural visualization. I was caught up in my own subjectivity. It took the cyclic motion of soft systems methodology and action research for me to realise that. But I did come through with an effective method after analysing the interviews, and that was the inclusion of the sky. Now that first test was actually a pilot test. and it came through with a few different themes and additions. And I've actually got, if you move to page 7 of your handouts, final data analysis. Now, there was a reason why Jeffrey Ferris-Smith, who was the first respondent, the architect who made this, and the second supervisor of my research, came up with this response. I'd also tested, I conducted interviews, depth interviews, but also tested their learning preference. I wanted to find out what was actually affecting the way they were perceiving the information and they were going through cognition. And inside the monitoring system of creating this, that was actually, I was going through different learning styles. I was thinking, okay, kinesthetic people need to actually touch the environment. Visual people need the vision. People who are auditory, they need to hear something. And that's where the self-deception came in slightly with this guy. And something that was great about the interview and finding this out was that the visual perceptive modality was actually a very strong preference of Jeffrey Ferris-Smith. And that came through as well as his kinesthetic, because the two main themes of the interview was navigation and line of sight, something that was kinesthetic and visual. So what I worked out that the modalities that I was testing were actually indications of when people were going to actually criticize and scrutinize my package the most effectively, and that's what I was trying to do. My sampling method was specifically for people in a high caliber. I chose my supervisor from someone that had created numerous amounts of architectural structures. He's actually the director of Humphrey and Edwards, which is a prestigious architecture firm, and has created many of these visualizations on a large scale. So, the sampling method for the rest of my interviews, I was looking for town planners. I got town planners, but they were also strategic planners. Strategic planners actually set the goals, set the guidelines for town planners. So I was going that up echelon. Sampling method is purposive sample, and could also be considered an intense sample because they're intensely immersed in the environment of development applications. Not only as a town planner, but the people that make the rules for town planners. Now, before I go into the themes of each town planner, I'd actually like to show you, and that's what you should be looking at as I'm explaining each interview. It's on page 7. At the bottom of page 7, you'll have a location map. Does everybody have that? A little bit of interaction. Yep. Okay, you are here. You're wondering, what am I doing inside the presentation saying you are here? This is what the town planners saw when they were interviewed. Throughout the interview, they were allowed to interact with the environment. And you would have noticed you start to see something that's familiar. That was a screenshot I had earlier. This is actually what Jeffrey was looking at when he made his comment of line of sight. Because he had seen the skyline and he wanted to perceive it as he would be. He wanted to the environment to effectively communicate to him. Now, something else that he came up with was actually the navigation. I was actually making him use both the keyboard and the mouse with two hands. The way he wanted it to work, because he was getting stuck in the environment, it was just all on the mouse. The reason why I was in the interview, he was there. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know how to handle the environment. So, by putting it all on the mouse, it made it more obvious to him that the way you navigate is by moving the mouse left or right, walking through the environment. And it was that much more easy to understand. Now, you've got Tim Stewart. Tim Stewart is a strategic planner, he's a developer, and he's also in software development as well. He's intensely involved, he's been in the industry for 14 years, and he has a wide variety of perspectives that he can give me. I asked him to give me the hardest critique he could. I said, if there is something wrong, I want you to tell me about it. I don't want you to hold back. I wanted in-depth information about where he was coming from. The comments I came was actually just ecstatic. I was expecting to nitpick on specific things because these people were professionals in the industry. I would expect they had seen some type of virtual reality simulation before, and they had, but not in the video game environment, not using the emotion of video game entertainment. What I got was, I can see the space in relation to me. I feel like I am there and guessing it. This takes visualization to a level that simply does not exist. This makes scale relevant. With this, you perceive yourself in the height of the building. This didn't show up specifically inside his learning communication, in his learning styles. One thing it did show up, however, was an improvement on communication on a level I didn't exactly perceive to be straight away. I was thinking of space understanding. Something that came up was the ability to communicate to others. Now that was something in his communication learning styles that he actually that was a preference of his learning style. And that meant that he wanted to socialise in the environment by telling others the problems he had. Because he knew the communication method was great. He just told me from that statement. But now he wanted to do was tell the architect or tell the plumber or tell the drainage guy what he thought of that specific design. What was come up with was a clipboard. I'll pass this around. Basically, the clipboard allowed you to put your name, category, a description, a screenshot of where you are at the time, and then you can communicate directly with another architect who's working on the project in China, a professional in the field that wants to work out a specific drainage problem. I was taking the communication beyond this. However, I was specifically staying on spatialization. That was my aim, the mental picture. And throughout the rest of the interviews, that's what came up. I kept getting more and more things that were beyond the communication method. So I kept asking them, was this method effective? Yes, okay, I just seriously, I want you to tell me it's not effective. I need this answer. It was only nitpicky things. It was always, this is a great, none of the other methods out there are actually as effective as this. However, there is still room for miniature and scale models. CG perspective, this isn't the be-all and end-all. There is still room for those because the people that can't use computers as such still need those methods. But what is the most effective method for communicating an architectural visualization? My respondents, who are professionals in the field, I had strategic planners, not only town planners, told me this was so. So, in conclusion, from the start of the project, I never thought I would end up where I am now. No way. Learning game design, virtual reality, it's been a life-changing experience for me. My statement, an exploration and critical analysis of methods for effectively communicating three-dimensional architectural visualization. To answer this, I fully immersed myself in the process of the research and development, and my emerging interpretations have survived my attempts to disconfirm them. The virtual reality visualization was made from an ideal concept and tested by literature investigation, guided by an academic in the field. It was then implemented and tested by the architect who designed it, designed the original development, and then tested by strategic planners who are leaders in the field. What is the most effective method for communicating a three-dimensional architectural visualization? In this example, the method is still confirmed effective, and there has been a rich exploration for improvements to make it even more effective. The research has given benefit to the building industry, virtual reality community, and myself. Recommendation. The action research process allowed me to bring about change to a situation while generating an understanding of it. The cyclic process of action research gave me a self-reflective learning experience, and this was where some of the difficulties of subjectivity was realised. The most significant conclusion of the process I can make is that the soft systems methodology allowed the essential features of the system to be taken away from the complex situation, and this stopped those features getting lost in subjectivity. Where I think this needs to go down? Definitely continue the action research cycles to expand upon the prototype, to include the additional improvements that I've set out in the report, and the things that have been grounded from my interviews. I also think it should explore and critically analyse effective communication of marketing off the plan, and you notice that's one of the things that came from my interviews. And it should also explore and critically analyse effective communication in the sketching stage of architectural design. I was starting to get a communication method that would create a dialect between designers of architecture and also the people who are creating the plans. So if this communication method could be implemented from the start, a lot of problems could be solved and a lot of time could be saved. Something that I actually thought myself as a perception or a conceptual model of that could go further. Explore and critically analyse effective communication in augmented reality. By augmented, I mean you'll put your virtual reality glasses on that don't retrain the depth perception of your eye, with clear lens that you can see what you're looking at right now, with the 3D environment put over the top. Have a laptop with you that's got GPRS, so it knows exactly where you are. Using virtual reality head tracking simulations, so it's real-time compositing the virtual reality environment as well. And then you will be able to walk through the environment. You'll probably be walking through stairs, but you'll still be the exact environment that the final thing would end up at. And this was something that I found with an interview with the architect. He says he gets to a site inspection and he can't understand it. All he can see is in the CAD his grid lines. I want my grid lines. this is another step. This has been a great experience for me, and something interesting that I never thought would happen. Let's take this as a little quirk. On all of the interviews that I conducted, each person actually was engaged by the idea that it was a game. This is a video game, this is going to be fun. If I left them with a weapon, it elevated through the roof. What eventually happened was when you told an architect he could shoot, or a town planner, they could shoot, refer to final data analysis, Jeffrey Ferris Smith, architect. His last quote on weapons: "This is great. I can get rid of the bits I don't like." Thank you, that ends my presentation.
Doing